Hey everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Crime. If you're new here, I'm Lena Waters. Here we talk about all things true crime from solved to unsolved cases. Whether you're listening to the podcast or on YouTube, my hope is to spread the word about cases that need to be solved or learn what we can from other solved cases. So if you like this episode, share it where you can so you can spread the word too. This is part 1 of a series I'm going to call Bardstown Mysteries. Bardstown was once voted the most beautiful small town in America, but it's now more well known for their unsolved cases. Today we're going to be talking about the unsolved case of Crystal Rogers. Crystal was 35, a mother of 5, and people describe her as a kind person who didn't have any enemies. She lived in Bardstown, Kentucky, a very small town with, like I said, multiple other unsolved cases that we'll get into in the next upcoming episodes. At the time she went missing, she was dating a man, Brooks Houck, who she also had a 2-year-old son with. Crystal met Brooks after her separation with her husband, Keith Rogers. After the separation, Crystal rented a property owned by Brooks Houck. She later got to know him, they started a relationship, and had 1 child together, Eli. During this time, Brooks ran for sheriff but did not get elected. He and Crystal ran Brooks's rental business together instead. Crystal, Brooks, and the 5 children were living together before Crystal disappeared. The last time Crystal was seen was on Friday, July 3rd, 2015. Brooks was the last person to see her. She was also seen on Walmart surveillance footage around 4:30 p.m., and a neighbor says that they saw Crystal bringing bags into the house around 5 p.m. This is the last time we know that she is alive and well. After this eyewitness testimony, Brooks is the only one who can share the following timeline, so take that with a grain of salt. Later in his interview with detectives, there are many gaps in his story, or he can't remember certain things, but we'll get into that in just a moment. Brooks says on July 3rd, he, Crystal, and Eli had dinner at their house. Crystal's children were with their fathers for the weekend, so they could have time to themselves. Around 7 o'clock, Brooks, Crystal, and Eli went to the Houck's family farm to feed the cows. The drive is about 20 minutes away from their house, so they got to the farm around 7:20. Their aunt, who lives on the farm, as well as Brooks's mom, has video surveillance that confirms this arrival. The surveillance system also shows Brooks leaving the farm about 15 to 20 minutes after getting there to go get feed for the cows. He pretty much turns right back around, though, because he realizes the store was closed. A lot of people speculate on this, like he should have known what time the store was closed, and he obviously had feed, so why did he feel the need to go? I'm not sure why. Maybe they were running low on feed, but it was also a holiday weekend, so maybe stores were closing earlier. I'm not sure. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt for now. When he gets back to the farm, he, Crystal, and Eli feed the cows. After they're done, they take a walk. Mind you, the baby is still with them for about a 2-mile walk, which is just questionable in my opinion. It was also raining this night. He says after their walk, they had a fire, they were burning some garbage for his mom, which is very common in some rural areas, not just farms. It's just an old school thing to do. My grandparents used to burn trash too. It was just the way things were done back then. Brooks says he, Crystal, and Eli get in his truck to leave around midnight. But as they're about to head down the road, Brooks gets a phone call from an unknown number and answers it. This is a 13-second phone call that we'll get into later. Anyway, they get back home around 12:15 to 12:30. He says when they got home around midnight, he went to bed pretty much immediately, while Eli and Crystal were still up, and she was playing a game on her phone. He says Crystal is a night owl and sleeps in late. When he woke up the next day, which would have been the 4th of July, around 6 to 7 in the morning, he got a phone call from a friend and employee, Danny Singleton. Remember his name. Brooks says this phone call was about some work on one of the rental properties. Then he realized Crystal and her car were not there. He assumed she either went to her cousin Sabrina's house, went to her parents', or went out to party with her sister, Brooke. Friends and family of Crystal's say this was not something she would have done, and no one came forward saying they were having a party and Crystal was coming. It was the 4th of July weekend, but it still just didn't make sense to the family. They say Crystal did go to parties sometimes, but she wouldn't have left during the middle of the night. Brooks later told Nancy Grace that he was not worried at all because they had a stressed relationship at times. Brooks said that she often went to her cousin Sabrina's house to cool off. But Sabrina said Crystal only came over twice in a 3-year span to cool off after a fight with Brooks. Sabrina says the longest Crystal ever stayed was 2 hours, and that was her being stubborn. She never spent the night. Brooks said that he called Crystal to see where she was that morning, but she didn't answer, so he went on with his day. He said blowing up her phone would just make things worse. Now, I don't believe he contacted anyone else, any of Crystal's family or friends, until the next day, July 5th. This is something I don't understand. I know every relationship is different, but if my boyfriend and I were in a fight, even if I didn't want to talk to him, I would still be very concerned if I hadn't heard from him for an entire 24 hours. I just find this bizarre. Anyway, after Brooks and Eli get ready for the day, they were planning on going to a 4th of July party, but Brooks had to go to the farm that morning first. He went to the farm, he doesn't really know what time, but it was in the morning, and he got on the bulldozer to patch up a spot that was having some water or flooding problems. We'll find out later that this is odd because Brooks never uses the machinery that another worker on the farm does. He calls Crystal again, but he doesn't want to blow her phone up too much because that just makes her mad. After he's done at the farm, they go to a party with his mom and Eli, but they don't stay for fireworks, and no one asks about Crystal. They go back home. Brooks says a friend might have come over, but he doesn't remember, and then goes to bed. Meanwhile, on the 4th of July, Crystal's mom, Sherry Ballard, is getting text messages from one of Crystal's daughters asking where her mom was. Sherry texted Crystal to get in touch with her daughter. Sherry also called Crystal's friends to see if they had seen her that day, and they all said no. That night, Crystal's daughter sent another text to Sherry saying she still wasn't able to get in contact with Crystal and that her phone was off. The next day, Sherry went to the Bardstown Police Department to file a missing persons report. Sherry understood that Crystal might not answer her phone on the 4th of July with parties and drinking going on, but not the next day. Crystal would have responded by then. As Sherry was on her way to the police department, she saw Brooks in his truck with Eli in the back seat. By this point, Brooks had contacted Sabrina, Crystal's cousin, that morning to see if she knew where Crystal was, and Sabrina said no. So at least he's trying now, 24 hours later. Sherry went up to Brooks and asked where Crystal was. Brooks told Sherry he didn't know. He woke up the day before and she wasn't there. Sherry asked if they got in a fight, and he said no, that they got in a spat because Crystal thought Brooks treated her children differently, and he told Sherry that he saw where she was coming from. I've seen reports that say that Crystal would have to buy her own kids' food, but Brooks would buy separate groceries for Eli. I don't know, to me this is kind of understandable because Eli was only 2 and the other children were older. I guess if he was really stingy about it, that would be cause for concern, but I don't know, I'm not a step-parent. Brooke, Crystal's sister, also made some comments about Brooks having Eli. She said that it caused her concern if Crystal didn't have the baby, then Brooke did. She says Brooks never had Eli to himself. Sherry told Brooks that she was going to the police station to file a missing persons report, and he just responded, "I think that's what you should do." Sherry says he showed no concern about his missing girlfriend, who was also the mother of his child. He never offered any help to Sherry, even during the searches that would come. The Ballards and Brooks had a rocky relationship, so Brooks claimed he felt uncomfortable searching with Crystal's family. Sherry told him that they would set aside their differences, that they needed all the help they could get, but he never helped. From this point on, Sherry believes Brooks had something to do with her daughter's disappearance. Then, as Sherry's at the police department, Crystal's brother got a phone call saying that someone found Crystal's car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. Tommy, Crystal's father, and Casey, her brother, went to check it out. Casey Ballard says that when he got to her car, he knew it was hers, but there was definitely something wrong. First, her keys were still in the ignition, and her purse and cell phone were left in the car. They also noticed that the seat was pushed back farther than Crystal would have had it, and the back tire was low, but not flat. Tommy Ballard said that his daughter would have not pulled over on the side of the road for a low tire, not even for a flat tire. Casey recalls a time when Crystal had a completely flat tire and continued to drive home, somewhere safe, and her rims were pretty much destroyed because of it. But Crystal was cautious and would not pull over, especially on the side of a busy road. Following this discovery, police say that they searched the car with a fine-tooth comb, but this is not necessarily true. During a documentary with Oxygen called The Disappearance of Crystal Rogers, they had a forensic team process the car, and one of the examiners said that they should not have had any of the evidence that they did. They had hundreds of bags of evidence. But a former Kentucky police officer told Oxygen that in the state of Kentucky, the crime lab will only process 10 pieces of evidence for a murder investigation unless a judge signs off on more testing. Crystal's case was not even a homicide case at this point, so who knows how much they actually took to process. He says that Kentucky has such limited resources and funding that they're not able to do a thorough forensic examination. Police and the Ballard family also searched the area where Crystal's car was found. They formed a group of hundreds of volunteers and called themselves Team Crystal. Tommy Ballard, who Sherry called Crystal's lead investigator, hosted search parties every day for 6 months straight following her disappearance. Brooks never attended any of these. Tommy's sister, Sherry Ballard Barnes, had also gone missing in 1979. She was 7.5 months pregnant and married. Her family believed her husband, Eddie Barnes, was guilty because their relationship wasn't going well and he didn't want to pay child support. This was proven to be true when Eddie's accomplice was charged for another crime. He took a deal that he would bring the police to Sherry's remains to reduce his sentence. Her remains were eventually found after years of searching. She was beaten, shot, and then burnt. Tommy felt like he was reliving this nightmare all over again when his own daughter disappeared. Police also brought bloodhounds to the scene where Crystal's car was found to potentially track where Crystal may have gone after abandoning her car. Their handler said that the dogs were acting as if Crystal had never been there in the first place. There was no trail for the dogs to track. But the bloodhounds did track Crystal from her and Brooks's house to the Houck's family farm, so the dogs were not defective. This showed law enforcement Crystal was not on the Bluegrass Parkway where her car was found. Instead, her car was planted by someone else. 2 days after Crystal was reported missing, Nelson County Sheriff's Office released a press conference stating that Brooks was being cooperative with the investigation. They had already met with Brooks twice, and he seemed to be forthcoming with investigators. But then on July 8th, he did another interview with the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. This one is online, and the others are not, I believe. Anyway, this is where most of the July 3rd and July 4th timeline comes from. When Brooks walks into the room, he brought in all these documents and pictures to back up his timeline. Detectives had already told him that he was the main person of interest because he was the last person to see Crystal, and there were some gaps in his timeline that he claims he can't remember. But they also told him that they weren't on any sides because by this time, people in Bardstown were already calling Brooks a murderer, including Crystal's family. He seems very forthcoming at first in this interview, saying, "Ask whatever you have to ask." He tells Detective Snow, the lead detective on this case, that he and Crystal had a bumpy relationship, but he kept repeating, "We always move forward together." Snow asks Brooke if he knew anything about Crystal wanting to break up with him and move out. Now, Brooke, Crystal's sister, says that she saw Crystal 2 days before she disappeared in a later interview with the Today Show. Brooke says that Crystal told her that she was planning on getting a job, moving out, and leaving Brooks. but Brooks claimed that he knew nothing about this plan. He also keeps mentioning how she would go to Sabrina's house, her sister's house, or her parents whenever they were arguing, but he never talks about the argument in this interview, so I wonder if they discussed it in a previous interview. We know Brooks told Sherry that they had a spat about the kids. Detectives are also curious about a piece of disturbed land that was on the farm with a bulldozer nearby. Brooks already told Snow that he never used the machinery, that there was another guy on the farm who did that. Brooks said he did use the bulldozer Saturday the 4th because his mom wanted him to fix a spot where there was some kind of water issues like flooding. Anyway, for about 40 minutes of the interview, Brooks seems fine and truthful, although quite forgetful, until Snow asks Brooks why he wasn't concerned about his girlfriend not being in bed when he woke up. Snow told Brooks that if his wife was not in bed when he woke up, that he would be very concerned. Brooks responds defensively and says this.
But what you're not aware, what you're missing is a lot of times that her and Brooke, her sister, or Sabrina, a lot of these girls that they do all these, they go out and do stuff. Sometimes they do these, this is going to be embarrassing for me to talk to you about, but I'm wanting to get everything cleared up as quickly as I can. They do these fantasy parties. All these girls get together. They talk about and do whatever. And it's not uncommon for them, when they go out and party, they stay out the better part of the night, if not the whole night. So, and of course, I always have the children, during that. They don't take the kids to that. Matter of fact, I take care of some of their other children while they're the ones going. It's not uncommon because they know I don't get into all that stuff, and they know that I'm a man, don't get me wrong. Understand that, a white-blooded American male. And there's no sense, I'm not telling you anything different, but they do all these parties and order all this stuff. Well, who gets the kids? I'm good enough to get the kids for all this, and I'm a good enough person to do that. And then when everybody sees a little bit of distress, they're going to throw me under the bus.
He definitely seems pretty mad about this, almost like he has a grudge against Crystal or her friends for watching the kids. The reason why Brooks is saying they're throwing him under the bus is because rumors started spreading that the IRS was after him, that Crystal wanted to leave him, and that he was a murderer. I also believe there was a time he slipped up, so let's play that and listen closely.
Now I've got a little boy who's 2, who's going to grow up his life if something's not done where she's not brought back safely.
Did any of you notice when he said Eli's going to grow up his life and then pauses? I'm very curious about what he would have said without pausing, and if he was possibly going to say, Eli's going to grow up his life without a mother, instead of Eli's going to grow up his life if something's not done where she's brought back safely. Let me know what you think. Soon after this, Brooke starts to get angry, then emotional.
Do what you got to do. I'll do whatever I can, but this is starting to get silly. I don't need an attorney. I haven't asked for an attorney. I don't need none of that. I'm innocent. I'm willing to talk to whoever. But this to me is really starting to get silly, because I feel like, I don't have a Facebook page. I don't have time to get on the internet. I don't know a lot about computers. Crystal did all that for me. I didn't have to do it because that's something else that she always took care of. So now I have people coming back to me telling me that they're completely trashing me online for the whole media. I've taken 17 years of my life, and I feel like I've worked hard to get a good education. I've worked hard all these years. I've built a nice life for me and my family, and now my whole family's name is trashed for something that's completely not even tied to me. That's where I'm at right now. So I'm extremely upset. I'm hurt over it. I try to put on a tough shell on the bubble and move forward. It's extremely difficult to get up in the morning and push on and look at Eli and know that here I've got a million things going on that I have to get done. And then who's going to suffer? He is. And it's not right. I'm ready to hire an auctioneer to sell all this stuff so I can be there for him like Kristen.
he says that this was starting to get silly, I don't know why I just got so infuriated. Why is ruling you out so silly, Brooks? Oh wait, because they can't. And they still haven't. I truly do believe that he was upset, but not because Eli would grow up without a mother, but because of his reputation. Anyway, he talks about why the Ballards are pointing the finger at him, and he says it's based on a grudge they've had since October 2014. He had taken Crystal's oldest daughter's phone away, which Crystal had supposedly told him to do. But he ended up twisting Crystal's daughter's arm and spraining her wrist. He brought her to the hospital and CPS came to check it out, but it was ruled to be an accident. He says ever since this incident, the Ballards and his relationship has fallen apart. Brooks also questions why a family member found her car and not the police, and asks specifically who found it, almost like he was going to point the finger at someone. Around 6:30, Detective Snow tells Brooks that his phone was ringing on the table outside of the room, but Brooks says that it was fine and keeps talking. We'll later find out that this was his brother, Nick Houck, calling. About 10 minutes later, Snow asks Brooks about that 13-second phone call that he just can't seem to remember. So Brooks calls the person back, and it was actually an employee of his. So here's that phone call.
Hey, I need your help while I got you on the phone here. Do you remember the other night you called me really late, and I forgot what you asked me. Can you? I guess it wasn't on the phone. I might have been tired. I know it was pretty late at night. Can you remember what you asked me or what you were after? I can't remember.
Yes, sir, I can. I called to ask you for them numbers for a house.
Oh, for a rental house.
Yes, sir.
And what did I forgot? What did I tell you?
You told me that you would call. What's her name? Katie or whatever. She handles all that.
Crystal.
Crystal. Okay, I apologize.
Yeah.
And, she said she handles all that, and that you would get back with me on it.
All right. Thank you so much, Nell.
Now, this is when Detective Snow switches up, and you can tell he is just blown away. After a few moments of silence, he starts to question why Brooks would tell this employee that he would call Crystal if she was with him. So here's that clip.
Okay. So that begs a question in my mind.
All right.
If she's in the truck next to you when he called, why would you need to call her about getting numbers for rental
Because
property?
being that late at night, we're headed to the house. You know, I just wouldn't. She normally's not going to deal with stuff that late. And I mean, I probably didn't even look at the phone to see who it was calling me. I'm sure I just answered it. You know.
But he said you told him that you'd need to call her.
All right.
Why would you need to call her? I mean, that's an odd phrase for someone who's sitting next to you in the truck. Do you understand? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. But I mean, that's what if that right there is what I told him, that right there is what I told him. We wasn't on the phone that long, but normally I would just, she handles all that, and that's what I would do. She's not going to want to mess with that kind of stuff that late. I'm sure I probably tried to answer the phone really quickly, so that it wouldn't, a lot of times after I get moving, Eli goes to sleep, you know. Sometimes he goes to sleep in the truck, sometimes he doesn't. So if you want to call him, and you got his number and everything, if you want to call him, you know, you can call him.
Brooks is so stumped by this, it's almost laughable. After Brooks pleads his case, they sit in silence for about 30 seconds as Detective Snow just sits there like, what the hell is going on here? Now, 30 seconds of silence may not seem long, but during an interview with the police, that's a long time. Snow just says flat out that he can't figure out why a woman would leave her phone and purse in their car, and also why the bloodhounds couldn't track Crystal's scent on the Bluegrass Parkway. Brooks pretty much agreed with him, but offered no explanation, saying that he didn't know who would want to hurt Crystal. And then around 7 o'clock, Nick Houck calls Brooks again. Brooks answers, and here's that phone call.
Can I get this?
Sure, yes. You come over?
No. I'm up here. I know that you didn't know I'm up here in this interview with The detective, Detective Snow. I've been up here a good little while. I'm filling out this statement here and everything. Are you telling me that's what I need to do? I'm not. I know that. But the way that I look at it is, I'm innocent. I ain't done nothing wrong. What, I know you told me innocent people have got jammed up, but if you're telling me to leave, I'll get up and leave. If you want me to. I know I'm going through a lot, but I'm trying to get this guy to help me. I don't think she's ran off with some other guy. I don't believe that. You can't make me think that. No. Yeah, so do I. I'll do exactly what you're telling me to do right now. You want me to get up and leave? Man, I don't think these guys. I don't think these people have got it vindictive just to skin me for no reason. Man, this is not their family. This is not. All right, thank you. He thinks y'all are gonna fuck is what he thinks.
Nick Houck is Brooks's brother, but he is also a Bardstown police officer, or at least he was at the time. This phone call really raised Snow's suspicions because why would a fellow police officer try to interfere with an investigation, let alone tell your brother that the cops were going to set you up? Family or not, you shouldn't be doing this as a police officer. Snow says that Brooks can leave, that he really didn't have any more questions for him. He just wanted to talk about what was going to happen next. He tells Brooks that the next steps are to find surveillance of Crystal's car on the Bluegrass Parkway and find out who was driving the car. He also says that he's going to interview some other people in Brooks's life, including his brother, to try to fill in some of the gaps in Brooks's timeline. So Brooks leaves, but Detective Snow just can't let that phone call with Nick go. He calls Nick and asks him to come in for an interview, and Nick pretty much said that he didn't have anything to offer, so he told Detective Snow that he wasn't going to come in. When Bardstown's chief of police, Rick McCubbin, heard Nick was being uncooperative with the investigation, he ordered Nick to go to the interview and cooperate, or he was going to lose his badge. Anyway, Nick finally comes in for an interview with Kentucky State Police on July 15th. Now remember, there's going to be 3 different police agencies throughout these episodes. There's the Bardstown Police Department, which Nick was on, the Nelson County Sheriff's Office, who took over Crystal's case, and then the Kentucky State Police, who interviewed Nick and took on other cases that we'll get into. Anyway, Nick testified in front of a grand jury that morning regarding Crystal's disappearance. His police cruiser was also taken on July 9th, the day after Brooks's interview. I'm not sure if he knew the exact reasons why it was taken, but he did know that it was regarding Crystal's disappearance. When detectives asked about his relationship with Crystal and Brooks, Nick said that they didn't really see each other much, and he probably only met Crystal in person half a dozen times. He also says that him and Brooks would talk on the phone, but they didn't see each other much either because they were both so busy. Nick wasn't just a police officer, he also owned a rental business separate from Brooks. He told detectives that when he saw Crystal and Brooks together, they seemed to be happy, but he did have knowledge of the fact that Crystal would complain about Brooks treating her kids differently. When detectives asked when Nick found out that Crystal went missing, he said a couple days after it was reported, either through the news or on Facebook. He said Brooks did not tell him. They definitely questioned why, especially with Nick being a police officer who could have possibly helped with the search. but Nick repeatedly claims he and his brother didn't discuss it at all. Then they ask Nick about the phone call he made to Brooks during his interview. They ask if Nick and Brooks hadn't talked about Crystal at all. How did he know that Brooks was doing an interview with police? Nick says Brooks just brought it up and he was worried not because he thought Brooks did anything, but because Detective Snow was the one questioning him. He says that Snow openly lied in court once, so he didn't trust him. Again, they ask how Nick knew Detective Snow was questioning Brooks, and he said that he knew Snow questioned his brother before, so he assumed he was the one doing it again. When asked if he told Brooks to leave the interview, Nick said no. So someone's lying here because we all heard this.
I'll do exactly what you're telling me to do right now. You want me to get up and leave?
The same night of Brooks's interview, security cameras catch both Brooks and Nick arriving to the farm at the same time, around 8 p.m. When police ask why they were meeting up, Nick says that they weren't, it was just a coincidence that they got there at the same time. He says he doesn't even remember seeing his brother that day. They ask Nick what he was doing, and he says he doesn't remember, of course. Just like Brooks, he can't remember a lot in this interview, and detectives are getting pretty frustrated. Brooks and Nick are also seen leaving around 11:30 p.m. from the farm together as well. Nick even waits for Brooks to catch up with him, and Nick just keeps telling the detectives that he doesn't remember this and it was just a coincidence. He also says he doesn't remember seeing Brooks that day or talking about anything regarding Crystal or the interview. Now, I don't believe this at all. At the end of Brooks's interview, Detective Snow says that he's going to talk to his brother Nick to fill in any gaps in Brooks's timeline. I think Brooks met up with Nick to warn him about this. Supposedly, before Nick's cruiser was taken, a neighbor saw Nick taking items from the trunk of his cruiser into his mom's car. Nick also doesn't remember doing this either. He also doesn't remember calling Brooks saying that he needed help, despite the fact that Keith Rogers, Crystal's estranged husband, overheard this conversation and told police. The detectives leave the room, and this time they come back way more aggressive. They ask Nick about the phone call that Keith Rogers overheard and if they can have his cell phone to confirm if this did or did not happen. Nick says yes, but he doesn't have it on him right now, but he's willing to let the police download it at a later time. Then the detectives really focus on two things. One being Nick and Brooks meeting each other at the farm that Nick just can't seem to remember, and two, Nick's police cruiser. So here's the part about the cruiser.
Which kind of leads us to the issue with the cruiser here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We got some issues.
Okay.
Okay.
You're aware that when the cruiser was taken from you, that it was actually taken to the Kentucky State Police Forensic Central Laboratory.
That's what I assumed, Chief would have done.
Okay. So while it's at the lab, they have you ever heard of luminol? You ever been in any kind of criminal investigation places? All right, you know what luminol is used for?
To find blood?
Okay. Or other
Bodily fluids.
fluids.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So we all excrete bodily fluids, sweat, vomit, anything, saliva. All that is what would fluoresce. Why would your trunk look like a Smurf if they sprayed it? Why would it fluoresce?
It looked like Chernobyl. There's a couple spots in your trunk and that blanket, just lit up like Chernobyl.
Why would that?
There's not going to be any blood in the trunk.
Okay, well, I'm not saying blood. I'm talking about other bodily fluids.
I don't have blood.
know.
There shouldn't be any bodily fluids in the trunk.
There's only one way bodily fluids can get into a trunk. That's if a body's nearby, right?
That's what I would assume.
Okay. Or unless, somebody puked in your trunk or something like that.
I don't think that happened.
Don't think that's the case.
Somebody peed in your trunk or...
No.
So why would that be if that blanket, when they looked at it at the lab?
I've got no explanation for that. I don't have, none whatsoever.
Nobody has access to that car but you. You drive it. You put the blanket in there. You said that. If there's something on that blanket or in that car, you're the person that has something to do with it, correct?
Well, I would assume, but
Okay.
There shouldn't be
Now,
there shouldn't be anything in the trunk of the car. I don't know
if somebody made that up or what the deal is, but
I mean, we're not in the business of making stuff up.
Yeah, we don't.
I mean, you know, that's not what we
I'm
do.
just telling you, our job is to find out what happened. It's not to change the course of events as they happened. It's to find out what happened. So we can't change what happened in that trunk. We can't change that the test showed that there's bodily fluids in that trunk area. What we need to do is we need to find out why that's the case.
And you see where we're coming from now. I mean, we've got two of you getting there together. You know, you say it's a coincidence. Two of you leaving together. The next day, your cruiser is found with this, you know, the stuff in the trunk, and it's taken to the lab. It's got bodily fluid in it.
I mean, I wish I knew what to tell you guys. You guys just gonna test that and let me know when you find out. There's no reason anything should be in the trunk of that car.
Dwayne Stanton, a retired homicide detective in Oxygen's documentary, said that this could have been a police tactic to get Nick to talk. This evidence never resulted in an arrest, which, if there was bodily fluids in Nick's trunk, or if the DNA was matched to Crystal, it would have. Or at least it should have. You never know in Bardstown. At this point, detectives just don't believe anything Nick says anymore. Like I said, they also really hone in on why Nick and Brooks met up at the farm, and why Nick is saying that it was just a coincidence when it was clearly not. So here's that clip.
I don't believe in coincidence after having this job. I don't know if you still do or not.
Not much.
I don't, because you know that when somebody is sitting here talking to us and telling us that everything's a coincidence, and we have either physical evidence or video or something to prove that that's not the fact, we kind of stop believing in coincidence. Now, that's the case of where we're at right here. You know, there's too much linking you and him leaving when he leaves the police department, going down the road, both arriving together, both leaving together. There is some reason why you all went out to that farm. Now, I'm not a big fan of amnesia either, because I've heard that 20 or 30 times a week when I'm talking to people, so I don't believe people just lose their memory. I think people forget what they don't want to talk about. They hide those things. And sometimes it's a good person that does that because they're trying to protect their family or they're trying to protect themselves. But you know what? There's also bad people in this world. And those bad people intentionally lie and intentionally use those excuses, to make it harder for the police to find out what really happened, because they're deep down, they're just a bad person.
Oh, I agree with you 100%.
So I don't think that we're dealing with a type of person here that's a bad person. I think we're dealing with somebody like you that's coming forward and trying to be cooperative. But then again, I think you're somebody that would protect your family in a case like this.
Nick says that he would never harm Crystal, and he knew his brother also would have never hurt Crystal. Then Nick asks the detectives who would use the police car to move a body, and what the detectives said made my jaw drop. They said it was the best way to go undetected. Who would pull over a police officer? Who would look in a police officer's trunk? Who would pull over a police officer who's behind someone with a flat tire? Then they start throwing their theories at Nick. The detectives wonder if Brooks and Crystal got in a fight and Brooks got too physical and accidentally killed her. Nick denies this, saying his brother would never do something like this. Then they give another theory.
I've got nothing to hide.
How about anybody else? I mean, did Crystal, do you think Crystal would have known something that she shouldn't have known, and that's probably why she went missing? If you don't believe the story about him getting, maybe a little physical with her maybe one time, do you think she could have known something?
What's that, man? Back up a little bit. I'm not following you.
Okay. Well, you said you don't believe the story that he maybe got a little physical with her.
No, I don't think Brooks has ever been physical with her.
Now, what about Brooks? He's got a lot to lose. I mean, he's got a pretty nice life, it seems like. I mean, he's doing pretty well for himself. What if she had some information that would turn his life upside down?
Yeah, I mean, he would still, no matter what she had, he wouldn't have done anything like this.
Okay. Now, what if she had information on somebody like you?
Hang on to this theory because I think this is plausible. They asked Nick if he would be okay with taking a polygraph, and he said yes, that he'd pass with flying colors. Now, Brooks already took a polygraph, and his came back inconclusive, so he neither passed nor failed. On July 24th, Nick completely failed the polygraph test. He wasn't as willing to take it as he initially told Kentucky State Police, but basically the chief told him he had to in order to show that he was cooperating with the investigation. And as I always say, polygraphs are not the most accurate way to prove someone innocent or guilty. And I also say that your willingness to take one is also not an indicator of guilt. But if you're a police officer, I don't know if I have that same stance, especially if you're willing to take it one day and then the next you're not. When the polygraph examiner tells Nick he failed, Nick becomes furious. But the polygraph examiner definitely throws some shade back.
Or you haven't been completely truthful about things. Not just kind of skip. I haven't been completely truthful about a couple
I've been 100% truthful.
Listen to what I'm saying.
You listen to what I'm saying. I've been 100%
Why are
truthful.
you yelling at me?
Well, because you're telling me I'm lying and I know I'm not. I know the truth, you know? And I've been 100%
You don't know
honest.
the truth.
With you, the grand jury, and everybody else I've
No,
spoken
you
with.
haven't. Here's what I'm getting at. We just said it.
Yes, I have.
No, you haven't.
I most definitely have. And if you don't want to believe it, that's your issue. It's not mine.
It's not just me. I showed you.
Dude, I don't give a goddamn what your fucking computer said.
I
Okay?
think you do.
I'm telling you that I have been 100% honest with you.
Is this how you act when you just act this way towards Crystal?
When somebody
When he said, "Is that the way you talk to Crystal?" I just could not believe it. Nick just continues to plead his innocence, and the examiner does give him the benefit of the doubt.
Am I saying that you did it or you didn't? No, I'm just saying you know more than we did. Whether that's a simple conversation with your brother or whether you were physically involved out there, I can't tell you. Either one of those things would explain what I'm seeing. My hunch is it's something that your brother told you.
I don't know anything. He has not spoken with me about this. He's my brother.
I'm glad you said that because he probably would know better than to say specific things. So it's a matter then perhaps of what you observed, what you saw other people say.
When the chief heard about Nick's failed polygraph, the Bardstown Police Department fired Nick Houck. Now, the chief was only able to make a recommendation for Nick to be fired. The mayor had to approve it, but the mayor did. The chief at the time said that Nick was not representing the Bardstown Police Department well, and that included ethics and integrity. But Nick's failed polygraph wasn't the only reason Nick was fired. It was just the last straw. Nick was written up a few times for insubordination, failing to call EMS to the scene of an accident, and failing to file a missing persons report. He would also sleep on the job, come in late and leave early, and take the cruiser for personal trips. On July 12th, investigators also searched the Houck family farm. Any findings from the property have not been released to the public, but there was some news coverage that claimed police had taken some farming equipment. Now, I'm curious if they took the bulldozer because they really seem to focus on that in Brooks's interview. I've also seen reports that dogs indicated at a burn pile on the farm's property. Tommy Ballard said that the police told him 3 dogs indicated at a spot in the barn. Tommy said that the police told him this is where they believed Crystal was killed. But again, nothing came of this. Tommy was pretty upset because they only sent 8 officers to search the farm, and the property was over 200 acres. There's just no way they were able to search thoroughly. He says that the Nelson County Sheriff's Office just didn't have the resources to solve his daughter's case. They also searched a lake nearby the farm called Melody Lake. They brought cadaver dogs on the lake multiple times, and Cherry Ballard says the dogs indicate at the same spot every time they go to that lake. But something that bugged Sherry is when the police brought in divers. She said that they only dove in certain sections of the lake, so it is possible that Crystal could be in the water. She has tried to have the lake drained, but police refuse to do it. Again, resources are limited in this state, let alone a town with a population of about 14,000 people. On October 16, 2015, the sheriff announced that Crystal Rogers was presumed dead as a result of homicide. He says she just vanished off the face of the earth, and he believes she's dead. He also said that Brooks Houck is a suspect. 2 months later, Danny Singleton is arrested for 38 counts of perjury. Danny Singleton was a longtime friend of Brooks as well as his employee. Tommy Ballard said at the time that if anyone knew anything about Crystal's disappearance, it would have been Danny. He's the only one Brooks would trust. Danny was also the one who called Brooks around 6 a.m. on July 4th, asking about quote-unquote work. Danny Singleton told a grand jury that he was in Louisville at the time of Crystal's disappearance, but later in a polygraph exam, he admits to lying about this. He pled guilty and he was sentenced to about a year of jail time. Probably around this same time, Tommy Ballard gets a tip from an eyewitness who saw Crystal's car on the Bluegrass Parkway. Not on the 5th, but on the night of July 3rd, around 10:30 to 11 p.m. on their way home from work. This witness claims that they also saw the car the next morning on their way back to work. They went to the police with this information after finding out that reports were saying Crystal left in her car after midnight on the 3rd, based on Brooks's timeline. Another person came forward saying they saw an older white Buick or Caprice about a mile up the road from Crystal's car, nearby the Houck's family farm on the 3rd. The white car was not there the next morning, though. Could this have been the same car that transported Crystal's body, which was why the tracking dogs didn't catch her scent at her own car? Tommy made a Facebook post asking if anyone knows about this older white car to come forward. Then someone commented on the post that the car may have belonged to Brooks's grandmother, Anna Whitesides, who owned an older white Buick. Tommy brought this forth to the police, and by the time they got a search warrant, the car was sold to a dealership in Louisville, about an hour away from Bardstown. They eventually tracked down the car, but again, we don't know if anything came from this. On July 1st, 2016, Anna Whitesides was called to testify about the car, and she pled the 5th. She was told that she was not a suspect, but they were curious as to who had access to the car and why it was sold. The state had reason to believe that her car was used in an attempt to dispose of a body, that it was cleaned and sold in an attempt to cover up evidence. Now, this woman was in her 80s and may not have been in her right mind. But when the former Bardstown mayor was asked about Anna, she said that she didn't know if she would be able to rat on her grandchildren either, and that Anna was a very well-respected member of the community. I just gotta take a moment right now. What is going on here? I'm sorry for yelling, but I can't believe this, and it just gets worse. Anna was given another chance to testify, but this time it was more confidential. The judge determined that this would be the best way to get Anna to talk and confirm if she was hiding something or if she just didn't know. But you don't plead the 5th for something you don't know. It's a right to not self-incriminate. If you don't know, you just say, I don't know. In August of 2016, police searched Anna's, Nick's, and Brooks's home, as well as the family farm. Police were seen taking 2 bags of evidence from Anna Whiteside's home. It later came out that they were searching for DNA. Sherry Ballard believes Crystal never left the farm on the night of July 3rd. What I'm really curious about, because I've seen that this is a lot of other people's theories as well, is if the surveillance footage that Brooks's aunt had saw Crystal leave the farm with Brooks at the time he said they left. I'm not sure if the video quality was good enough to see inside the car, but that's just been something I want to know so bad. Information on what was found at any of the houses or the farm were not released, but Tommy Ballard spoke out again. Although they brought in 28 officers, 20 more than the last time, he's just really frustrated that it was over a year since a search on the farm had been done. He says to a reporter, "I think the law's a joke." This is why he started his own investigation, creating a very detailed box filled with tips, searches, and theories. Mary Taylor, a member of Team Crystal, told Oxygen that Tommy was making serious headway on the case in the fall of 2016. She said he wouldn't talk on the phone, though, which gives me concern about who he thought was listening. Could it have been law enforcement? Sherry also says that the police were telling them that they were dealing with very dangerous people, and when Crystal's body is found, they should move out of Bardstown. Sherry also says that Tommy was being followed, so Tommy installed a dash cam on his truck. But on November 19, 2016, Tommy and his grandson, who was also Crystal's 12-year-old son, went hunting on their family farm. This farm was mostly just open fields that they used to hunt. When they got out of the car and started walking in the open field, a shot was fired. Tommy Ballard was shot in the chest and killed as he was looking through the scope of his rifle. And that's where we'll stop for today. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Crystal Rogers, please call 1-800-CALL-FBI or visit crystalrogerstaskforce.com. The FBI is also asking if anyone saw a red SUV driving near my old Kentucky home campground in Bardstown. It is unclear what time they are looking for. The exact location of the car is at 1064 Loretta Road, where Heaven Hills Distillery is located. The FBI believes the red SUV is a vehicle of interest and is seeking information about the driver. There is also a white SUV driving in the other direction, so if you know this driver or you are this driver, please come forward. I will leave a link in the description so you can see these photos if you're listening to the podcast. The other vehicle that they are looking for is unclear, but it was driving at 3:45 a.m. on July 4, 2015 at the intersection of Balltown Road and Pascal Ballard Road. Balltown Road is located right off Loretta Road, and this intersection is nearby the Houck family farm. Like I said, if you know anything about Crystal's disappearance or about these vehicles, please call 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to crystalrogerstaskforce.com. In the next part, we'll talk more about Tommy's death and the continued efforts to find Crystal. Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Crime, and I'll see you next time.